Hey guys, welcome to my channel. In today's video I will be talking about 5 characters that are underrated because they can bring more value to your account than what you initially thought about them, either when you first got them or maybe later on when you had a fully functioning team build and you didn't really need new characters. I will briefly talk about how you can build them, and I'm sure they're gonna be so much fun if you decide to give them a chance. And with all that being said, if you like this type of video, consider subscribing, as I will be posting a lot more content on this channel in the upcoming days. And now, let's get into the video, starting off with the first character, Sucrose. Sucrose is an amazing and easily accessible character, and I'm sure if you played for a while, you have a copy of her or maybe some constellations for her as well. She is a flexible unit that fits into many teams, especially if you don't have, let's say, 5-star characters like Kazuha or Venti. She also has a bunch of useful passive talents. For example, Catalyst Conversion and Mollis Favonius talents helps her team a lot by increasing their elemental mastery after she triggers swirl reactions, and you should definitely know the value of these passive talents in a reaction focused team comps. And as you guys are probably aware, she needs elemental mastery for her to maximize the amount of damage she outputs, as well as the buffs she offers for the rest of the team. But keep in mind, you need to have a good energy recharge for her from her artifact substats, because her burst costing 80 energy is quite a lot. It doesn't mean you should underestimate her at all, but you should get more energy recharge on her. But her best free-to-play option weapon is Sacrificial Fragments, as it provides a lot of elemental mastery and offers to skip the cooldown to 40% every time she deals damage, and even up to 80% for the R5 of this weapon, which I highly suggest if you can go for R5, as it helps a lot, which potentially means you can cast the elemental skill again and generate more energy, so in the end means more energy particles for her elemental burst to be active again. You may also use Mappa Mare as a craftable absolute free-to-play catalyst weapon, which also provides a lot of value for her, but I would still say Sacrificial Fragments is way better. As for the best set of artifacts, she should be using 4-piece Viridescent, which works perfectly for her and most animo units in the game, because she can get the bonus of 2-piece for 15% animo damage bonus, and increase her swirl potential by 60%, with also decreasing opponents' resistance by 40%, which can make a big difference in multiple reaction-focused team comps. And for the stat distribution in her artifacts, I would say Flower should have mostly elemental mastery, energy recharge, and attack percentage. Same with the Feather. As for the Sand, Goblet, and Circlet, you can choose all of them to have the main stat of elemental mastery, but keep in mind to include energy recharge in all the pieces as a substat. But crit damage and crit rate wouldn't hurt if it's available on them, while crit rate and crit stats only boosts raw animo damage. It does not affect swirl damage, so crit is not recommended for Sucrose support build, which most of you are planning to build her as. And when upgrading her talents, focus on elemental skill first, then burst, and finally normal attack. But I wouldn't focus on normal attack as much as the other two, because you wouldn't be using her for main DPS. A free-to-play team that works well for her would be Sucrose, Kuki Shinobu, Fischl, and Shinkjo. And if you have Yelan or Child, you can use her with one of those characters, plus adding a Bennett and Shangling to the mix can bring out a damage output that will be insane. Sucrose can gather enemies, enabling Shangling and Yelan or Child to execute combos easily, and Bennett, well, he adds value overall by being in the team, so she can also amplify the vaporized damage by increasing the elemental mastery of DPS and sub-DPS characters in her team. Inflicting elemental damage that can be swirled to an enemy, then use elemental skill to gather energy and increase elemental mastery of swirled element, then release burst to further increase elemental damage and gather enemies in one place. You can switch to main DPS, which in this case would be Yelan or Child, and then deal a lot of damage. That's basically how you can use Sucrose to be useful in your teams. As for her constellations, with C1 you will get one more charge of Sucrose's elemental skill. This will decrease the amount of energy that Sucrose needs and works well with sacrificial fragments. The next big constellation will be Constellation 4 that enables Sucrose to be a main carry. The elemental skill's cooldown will be further decreased with Sucrose's normal attack. This will enable Sucrose to be a main carry, especially with a team of off-field elementals to swirl. Constellation 6 on the other hand gives elemental damage bonus. With C6, Sucrose can provide additional elemental damage for the element that gets absorbed by her burst. So pretty much if you have C6 Sucrose, you're gonna be looking at a totally different character that's gonna be really valuable for your account. So overall, I think Sucrose has a lot to offer for pretty much every account. Even if you have a 5-star like Kazuha or Venti, you can still go ahead and use Sucrose on your other team because she can still be worth it and freshen things up for your account, especially if you're a veteran. On to the next character, Keqing. In my opinion, Keqing is also a semi-underrated or underappreciated character in the game. Ever since the introduction of Dendro, we have become familiar with Aggravate reaction for Electro and Dendro team comps, which is really good, and until that point, Electro wasn't being utilized to deal massive amount of damage based on reactions. And so, to build her for Aggravate team, which is where she shines the most, you have access to free-to-play options such as 3-star Harbinger of Dawn, or if you got lucky by gacha, a 4-star weapon called Lion's Roar, which is the best in slot weapon as a 4-star for Keqing. But Harbinger of Dawn is also another fantastic option, even though it's a 3-star weapon. The only downside to Harbinger of Dawn is that you need another character like Zhongli to keep the HP of Keqing up at all times, because it only works if the character has HP of 90% and above, so it can be a quite hard task if you don't have Zhongli or healers to keep the maximum HP on Keqing. As for her artifacts, you should be using 4 pieces of Thundering Fury with main stats of Sand being attack percentage or Elemental Mastery, and for Goblet, Electro damage bonus would be the best option, and as for Circlet, you can run crit rate or crit damage depending on your artifact luck and stat overall. And as for substat for all 5 pieces, you can look for crit rate, crit damage, attack percentage, and Elemental Mastery. As for her talent priority, you should focus on normal attack first, then go for burst, and lastly, her elemental skill, since her playstyle revolves around her charge attacks with normal attacks, so normal attack would make sense to be your top priority. You can pretty much use her with characters like Nahida, Dendro Traveler, Kukishinobu, Beidou, and Sucrose for Elemental Shred. So in this list, we already had Sucrose that is going to be really helpful for Keqing in the same team. If you have more characters, you can use Keqing with Kazuha, Kali, and Kukishinobu, and even Keqing, Kazuha, Nahida, and Fischl. And if you only have Keqing as a 5-star unit, then you can use Keqing, Sucrose, Fischl, and Kali, and she will be pretty good in either of those themes, doesn't matter. Also about constellations, C4 is the best constellation for her with her attack increased by 25% for 10 seconds after she triggers an electro-related elemental reaction, which in this case would be Aggravate, and you would only be getting her constellations if by any chance you lost 50-50 to Keqing one too many times. Since there won't be another banner for her, no need to worry about it, as C4 is just fine. But next time you lose the 50-50 to Keqing, don't consider yourself unlucky. Instead, try to build her and have a lot of fun with her, because she has a lot to offer, especially after Dendro was added. So don't forget to use Keqing in the future. On to the next one. Next one is a character that I don't see a lot of people talking about or even using, at least from my point of view, and it's Haizo. The reason I added Haizo to this list isn't because he's the best animo unit in the game, but because he's one of the most fun units that you can use. With his unique style of being a catalyst user and potentially doing a lot more damage, makes him a very fun character to use. He can constantly trigger Swirl, can provide decent crowd control, and works pretty well in elemental reaction focused team comps. The only downside in my opinion is the fact that cooldown of his elemental skill is quite long for the value that it can bring. If you're a free-to-play player, you can use Sacrificial Fragments, which is a great weapon with 221 elemental mastery at level 90 on him for elemental mastery build, or if you got lucky and want him as a DPS unit, you can have Vitseth on him with 55.1 crit damage at level 90. Go on and use that one instead. Now as for his artifacts, the best and the only way he will be viable overall is by using 4-piece Viridescent, which are focused on each piece being as follows. Sand should have attack percentage or elemental mastery, Goblet should be animal damage bonus or elemental mastery, and for Circlet should be crit rate / crit damage, or once again elemental mastery. If by any chance you had 3 pieces with main stat of elemental mastery and crazy substat, it wouldn't hurt to have all 3 as elemental mastery if you're using him in teams heavily relied on off-field elements to help him trigger Swirl. While Flower and Feather should grant you substat of elemental mastery, energy recharge, or any of the crit stats possible, one of his best teams would be Haizu, Xingqiu, Fischl, Bennett as a free-to-play option. And if you have Yelan, you can replace Xingqiu with her. Yelan and Xingqiu will work well with Haizu, especially since their elemental burst stays on the field and is triggered with normal attacks, and Fischl's elemental skill will constantly apply Electro, and with the right rotations have an almost 100% uptime, and Bennett provides heal and additional attack stat for the whole team while inside of the AoE of his elemental burst. So these characters work really well with Haizu, and I will highly suggest you build a team around him. As for his constellations, C2 helps him with the crowd control, as his C6 will boost his DPS potential because of crit rate and crit damage buff that it provides. And lastly, for his talents, your priority should be elemental skill first, then normal attack, and finally his elemental burst, since he heavily relies on normal attacks and his skill. What do you guys think? Do you agree with me that Haizu is underrated and underused, or you don't like him? Either way, let me know down in the comments, and let's get on to the next character. Our 4th character in the list is Kuki Shinobu, and I think she's great since her healing is scaled from elemental mastery, making her a great off-field support for Dendro Bloom teams, and is able to do some decent damage while being a support unit. And as for her weapon, you can use the free-to-play craftable Iron Sting, which can help her boost elemental mastery stat by 165 at level 90, which she needs the most. For artifacts, you should be using 4-piece Flower of Paradise Lost. And as for stat distribution regarding her artifacts, I would say Sand, Goblet, and Circlet can all be elemental mastery as a main stat, and as for substat, for every single piece you can either have elemental mastery, HP percentage, and energy recharge to help her maximize her damage and support capabilities. Remember, this build focuses on increasing the Hyper Bloom team's damage, and Hyper Bloom damage is affected by Kuki Shinobu's level, elemental mastery, and dendro resistance of the enemy. And to maximize the damage from Hyper Bloom, you need to aim for at least 800 elemental mastery on Kuki Shinobu. As for her team, I would suggest a free-to-play team which consists of Kuki Shinobu, Barbara, Dendro Traveler, and Kali. But if you have more characters in hand, I would suggest a team like Nahida as the main DPS, Xingqiu and Yelan for sub DPS, and Kuki for support. And you will see a huge damage number even with my half-built characters in the footage that I'm showing you guys on the screen. And as for her talents priority, go for elemental skill first and burst second. And pretty much no reason to go for normal attacks, but if you want to, you should leave that one to upgrade at last. Her elemental burst inflicts multiple enemies at once with Electro AoE attack. This becomes more powerful when you use it together with other elements such as Hydro and Pyro to produce multiple reactions. The personal damage of the skill also scales from Kuki Shinobu's max HP. As for her constellations, Constellation 2 for improved burst duration for 3 seconds, and Constellation 4 for protection and other benefits. And as you guys can see on the screen, but even without constellations, she is a solid unit, especially if you guys don't have any other solid Electro characters built. Since I have Raiden and a few others that I use, I haven't properly built her yet, and I'm planning to build her in the future. But how Artifact works in this game, it's gonna be real hard to build a lot of characters, especially when I'm making videos on them. So don't mind the level 50 Koki Shinobu in my video. I'm gonna build her in the future. I already have her semi-built on my second account, and I will be showcasing that account in the future. What do you guys think about Koki Shinobu? Is she truly underrated? And how many of you guys are using her in your main teams? And let me know down below in the comments, and I would like to read all of them. Last but definitely not the least, the character that helps most people in early game, none other than Noelle. She can act as a DPS, healer, and shielder all in one. With wide range of elemental burst, which is satisfying to use, the only downside is you need more constellations to get the most value out of her, but to be honest, everyone has a copy of Noelle, and surely with a few more constellations that you probably have, it's not a big deal and not a deal breaker if you don't have any constellations. As for the weapon, since she scales off of defense, you can use White Blind, which is a craftable free-to-play option that works really well with her kit, and you don't have to rely on luck to get a good weapon for her. And if by any chance you have Favonia's Greatsword, that could potentially also be viable for Noelle as well. For her artifacts, I would suggest 4-piece Husk of Opulent Dreams, with the focus on stat distribution being 4 sand, defense percentage, for Goblet, geo damage bonus, and for Circlet, crit damage or crit rate, and for substat of each artifact piece, including Flower and Feather, would be crit rate and damage plus defense, and finally energy recharge would also be pretty good. Overall, more defense on her makes her deal more damage and become a better character overall, so if you can manage to have 5 pieces with defense substat on all of them, it will be phenomenal, but not realistic enough, because with artifact RNG, don't be too hard on yourself if you can't have it on every single piece. Remember, I mentioned before that she also heals, and how it works is when she is attacking enemies, she also heals her teammates at the same time, which can be a lot helpful if you don't have any healers or shielders in your team, and she will be a good unit to rely on to stay alive in combat. For upgrading her talents, I would suggest either normal attack first or elemental burst, and at last go for elemental skill, since most of her value isn't actually coming from her elemental skill. If you have Constellation 6, you're looking at a different character, because at Constellation 6, Noelle's defense will provide additional attack to Noelle. Since she will fully scale off of defense, this will not only increase Noelle's overall damage, it will also make her easier to use and build. And as some of you might have guessed, she works really well in a full Geo team comp, with characters like Goru to boost her overall damage of a full Geo team, and Geo Traveler, Zhongli, Albedo, Ningguang, and Yunjin can all be good teammates for Noelle. And if you don't have Goru, don't worry, you can still use Noelle without Goru in any team that lacks shield or a healer, and she will bring value no matter what. And with that, the list for this video is done, and I would appreciate it if you enjoyed watching this video. Consider leaving a comment and subscribe, and let me know if you want me to talk about more characters like this. Also, if you have any other suggestions for a future video, I would also like to know your opinions. And with that being said, thanks for watching, have a good day or night, and peace.